One was in Mongpan, collaborating with a filmmaker from the Mongpan Youth Association. And then 2 other films in Pat'an and Mesa on the Thai border. So we've heard about each of these already in the presentations this morning. And I felt bad for Sotapo because we lost the imagery from your pictures of the lake. So I thought we should watch the lake movie. Also because it's the shortest one of the 4 films. So this film, it's only 4 minutes long. And it's an introduction to Dola Lake. So we have 4 minutes just to enjoy the film, and then we'll start the next panel. Okay, it had volume before. Sorry, I knew this would happen. I checked it 5 minutes before it started, and it was fine. Now it was volume. Okay, sorry, we can't watch the film. It had volume a little bit earlier. Maybe you heard it, and now there's no volume. Okay, shall we start the next panel? Okay, so please go to the Salvin Stories website and watch it in your own time. Okay? Okay, is John here?
Yes.
Okay, so let's start the next panel. And I will be having stern words with my computer later as to why I decided right now to not play the noise. It will be. Okay.
Does anyone have a hard copy of the agenda? No? Wow.
Yeah.
There you go.
Thank you very much. Really hard. Okay, ladies and gentlemen, good afternoon. My name is John Dorr. I work for the Government of Australia. I'm based at the Australian Embassy here in Bangkok, and I congratulate all of you for the work you put into the book and the other many things that you're doing. So we have a session now, as you know, Reconciling Knowledge Across Divides, and we have 3 distinguished speakers. We have Vanessa Lam from the University of Melbourne, Cherry Ong from the Pat'an University, and Kinsanda Ai from the Local University. So, normal procedures, we've got 75 minutes. We've got people that could all speak for 100 minutes each, but they have promised they will not. Okay? So they're going to give you, the essence of, things they'd like to say. Please be ready with some questions for them. And then please, let's have quite a conversation at the end of the session. So 75 minutes. Vanessa, you will lead us off, and please enjoy yourself, and I will interrupt you at an appropriate time.
Okay, thanks. And thanks everyone again for coming. I feel like our panel has the biggest challenge in keeping you awake post-lunch, so we will do our best. I am talking about work I'm presenting today that was more of a collaborative effort rather than my own primary research. That seems to be a theme across today so far. And I'm presenting this in an effort to think about the Salaween River, the people who live in the river basin, who care about it, its resources, its politics, across different knowledge divides. So just like the panel suggests, I'm not thinking about these as one specific approach that's better or worse, but really thinking about efforts and moments of collaboration across different groups of researchers who, do different kinds of research, position their expertise differently, and I think as a result make, slightly different contributions and interventions with their work. In that vein, there are a whole list of authors who you can see on the program who participated in conversations and research while putting together this state of knowledge of the Halloween. I'm just going to highlight a few who are here: Carl, Satapo, Shining, as well as our colleagues at Green Watershed, Montpen Youth, others at KSAN, and John Cheyenne at CMU. So, why would we want to, let's say, write a state of knowledge on a river? There's a few reasons. The first is that the Salaween, also known as the Tanaween or Nujian, is a significant river system, but unlike many other river systems, we love to say how little information there is about the Salaween. So the basin has been referred to as quote-unquote data poor, lacking in baseline biophysical information, as well as in lacking empirical or ethnographic case studies. So while in some ways the book as a whole is trying to address these issues, in this context, what we also do as a survey of different kinds of work in this paper is that we argue it's also worth recognizing that much of what we do know in terms of the values and threats to the Salaween River Basin, its peoples and ecologies, have been documented through civil society research in the form of reports, films, and advocacy documents, which might not always get the same credit or review attention or response as, let's say, academic work or even work that's more physical sciences or technical. So the key highlights then from reviewing this civil society literature was thinking about this scholarship and the work that it's done alongside the existing plans and policies for development of the river basin. And we also wanted to provide an overview of some of the multiple ways that civil society research is conducted and what claims it's making. So I think actually linking to an argument that P. Hang was making or has made in his chapter that we heard from the last panel. Sometimes, like local communities, they get boxed in as this homogenous group. Only one idea or one kind of anti or resistance narrative can come out of that work. And we see that in the way sometimes that civil society research is treated as well. And so again, it was an effort to kind of both analyze and critically assess this work, and this has been a conversation that's been ongoing. I thought it was also important because we have seen this kind of collaboration across civil society researchers and academics, and it can be like a kind of rare thing. I know many academic researchers and international consultants who are dismissive of civil society research. This is a quote from a recent article: "NGOs are just opposing anything in Myanmar." But as well, we hear it the same way from civil society sometimes as well. Academics can leave whenever they want. It isn't the same. So I think both of these kind of point to a bit of a tension, a lack of trust, and the kind of claims that you would or can make, whether you're embedded in civil society as an identity or as a, wanting to be this quote-unquote objective outside observer that some academics want to maintain. Not all, but some. So I think in this context, what I want to emphasize or think about then are not only these differences that exist in the kinds of research and documentation that academics or civil society researchers do, but to think about how they might also be complementary and perhaps more similar in some ways than it seems from the outside. So I, for instance, don't really believe that there's necessarily a clear, hard line to divide so-called academic and activist scholarship. Both actually rely in many instances on first-person accounts of, for instance, environmental dispossession or environmental change. Both academic work in terms of geography, which is what I'm familiar with, and civil society work, go talk to people, right? They collaborate with communities. But we also know that it's more complicated than that. Sometimes knowledge production can be instrumentalized for particular interests or goals, and that was raised actually in the previous session. So we might be doing research that tries to solve a particular problem, support a particular campaign or advocacy goal, or to submit to a funding body, or if you really want to push a particular argument, you could be doing research in that vein. So this then brought me to the question of what is a state of knowledge, and I wanted to play around with what it seems as sometimes definitive review or summary of literatures on an issue that might be more technical or instrumentalist by kind of taking a different approach. So one of the issues that came out of this review and conversations is just to look at the history, the kind of, I think, rich, deep history of civil society research in the Saline Basin. I think this work has really shaped how we understand the basin today. These are just some of the reports that I'm highlighting. And there's a couple interesting changes, I think, to note. So particularly in Myanmar, there's been a shift since the 2010-11 political opening, or move towards more democratic rule, where much of what we know about the Saline has been documented by civil society organizations and NGOs, but that maybe in the past, before 2010-11, we actually saw a lot more work coming from border regions rather than from the center. And this has accompanied a shift in funding priorities in the development space. So not to dismiss or critique either of those, but even just within this history of civil society work, we can see earlier work really focusing on the periphery and more recent work being done mostly from the center. Also, I want to recognize that, just like some of the researchers mentioned this morning, the work, especially at the periphery and before 2010, did carry a lot of personal and political risk to the civil society researchers and activists involved. And so that meant that maybe some of the more nuanced arguments or more empirical research was more difficult to kind of get out and share at that time. Non-expert on this area, but in conversations with my colleagues in China, we know there's a long history, which you heard a bit about this morning. And with successful work, they've brought attention to the river's challenges not only within China, but also in relationship to downstream countries, because we know what happens in China will have ripple effects far beyond national boundary lines. And again, I think this work in China, Myanmar, and Thailand by civil society researchers have really, I think clearly, as maybe this quote here shows from an early Watershed article, which is produced by Terra, they've documented an ongoing exclusion of people's participation in decision-making processes and governance of the Saline, particularly related to marginalized groups, including ethnic minorities, not only in China, but in Thailand and Myanmar. In assessing this body of civil society research, livelihood issues are also key. This is a film still from another really excellent film, which is looking at gender and water governance in Shan State, which I believe Shining was mentoring the group of young youth who put this together, just as one example of the ways that this work has been, research has been conducted and shared. Also, you heard about earlier from Satapo, in Karen State, there's been ongoing participatory research around Dawa Lake, highlighting the local governance as well as the interconnected resource values and livelihoods. And in Yunnan, you heard about local research on different kinds of values and uses by civil society organizations. There's also this great set of participatory projects that have been happening in Thailand, in addition to Myanmar and China. And this work, I mean, there's many people in this room who participated, and they're much better able to speak to this. But I think having worked in communities where they participate in these projects, I think there's a lot of work that was done in terms of positioning local people as experts in different ways, and actually supporting them to do their own research going forward. That was really important. In addition, what I want to highlight is that a lot of the civil society work that I reviewed, or that we reviewed and had conversations about, is that there's been a real shift to focus on values in addition to threats. So while sometimes I feel like maybe the media or the most attractive thing to focus on is threats, or, for instance, even conflict, which are really important, there's an important notion of starting with values in order to understand, for instance, even what is at stake when we talk about threats or challenges. So I think it's really in mapping out these values by different civil society actors after the past few decades that elucidates the significance of the existing plans and threats to the cultural, livelihood, and biodiversity values of the Salween. And I think the proposals for Salween Peace Park, which you heard about, really underline the sentiment and approach. They're putting forward a different vision for the Salween River, valuing peace and conservation rather than conflict or exclusionary development. So all this is to say that I think there is a lot of really interesting values, significance, and the work that civil society research has done has really shaped current debates around Salween and contributed to what we do know in an area where we hear a lot about issues around access to information, access for researchers, or even just access for local people in terms of resources. But highlighting this work doesn't mean there isn't room for more effort towards this, collaborative effort, and doesn't mean they aren't open to critique. I think this is a constant conversation that's evolving. And I think the idea is to maybe just move to recognize that the knowledge contributions from civil society researchers across the region are shaping what we do know and understand about Salween today, rather than kind of dismissing it or seeing it as separate from, let's say, other kinds of academic or even technical knowledge production. So these are just a couple of the key takeaways that the chapter, I think, goes into a bit more detail. I'm not going to go through those, but I do want to highlight, and I think I have like a minute left, a couple of new or potential interesting concerns that I think we might have going forward. And I'd also just like to hear from, there's many smart people in this room, if there are any other like pressing issues or concerns that we think should be addressed, and maybe what kinds of research would be best positioned to address it. So right now, I think one thing I'd want to add is that there's limited, or at least changing, space in terms of political as well as development funding and will for civil society work in the region. And so that's a really changing dynamic space. And I think we need to attend to it and understand the limitations across different country contexts and even subnational country contexts. Also, I think there's a need to focus more on river values in an academic context. We could learn a lot, I think, from the work that civil society research has done. Instead of focusing on conflict and threats, we could actually be doing a lot more to understand those values. I also think that from what we heard this morning, in addition to values, there are still a lot of challenges for resource constraints in the basin, and it seems like extraction and mining are something that is not new, but maybe intensifying in the last couple of years. And these resource extractions are not limited to resources just in the earth. A lot of them kind of cross boundaries. So for instance, we heard from Satya Pope earlier about cement factories opening up, which many of you probably know where cement comes from. Limestone karst. So there's a lot of tensions, I would say, in different parts of the region in terms of urban development's demand for cement, as well as sand that's extracted from rivers, as well as the limestone karsts that are being mined. That maybe deserve a little bit more attention, but it is quite a hot political issue in many of these contexts. So again, I just want to thank all of the collaborators and for their conversations and for talking through some of these different aspects of civil society work. And I'd be very open to hearing if you think there's more, what areas you think is more work to be done, and whether you think that would be best done as, what kinds of research projects. So, thanks.
Okay, thank you, Vanessa. So, great start to the session, and congratulations on representing the group, I think, in sort of putting that chapter, but also in just making the point that all of you are sort of researching. Whether it's civil society organisation, whether it's formal academic, whatever, all of you are potentially influencing, whether it's ministers, whether it's military, whether it's bankers. So the more you can save each other's time by sort of sharing information and letting people know what's already been done, the better. So we have a few questions, and my colleague on the left is ready with the first. Please, go.
Very briefly, one suggestion for Vanessa. Now we all transform from a data poor to, would I say data rich? I'm not sure. So, but the data that we have collected, for example, the types of fish swimming around the Salween River, the data that we have collected is not, the end point. It should be, mainstream with the local education system. As long as these ethnic groups and the people living along the Salween River know or not know could be determining the future of Salween. So we need to transform this rich data into tools for education. This is my suggestion. Thank you.
And a good suggestion. What are others, please? What strikes you when you sort of hear the presentation, given the topic? Other remarks? Yes, sir. Any others? Just catch my eye.
I just have, I guess, a question to build on Vanessa's question, which is, if we're looking at the way maybe civil society knowledge is being marginalised from being considered at the same level as academic expert knowledge, then what approaches can we use to have that Taiwan research, that local research, recognized in its own right and not having to fit into an academic taxonomy of knowledge? This is more of a question to add on.
Yeah, and those that have been sort of prominent in the Taiwan style work might like to speak to that sort of at the end of the session, of how do they think they've been effective in different places, or how has it been frustrating? Others, please. Yes, sir.
I think we can integrate something Taiwan style and academic or scientific or taxonomic work better, and then we produce some media or some knowledge to different level, like something poster, something booklet, and something academic document, and then I think very wide range of the audience will take that knowledge, and then they can go to the next step. Also, the important is a fishery assessment. How they fish, how they catch, how the migratory of fish in the Salween are happening right now. But in my knowledge, I learned that the Salween River and the Mekong River almost very similar pattern. The Salween have their sister river basin attached together, like the Trinitary, the Trinitary and the Ataram River. As well as the Mekong River, they have Dong Nai Saigon River, the sister system. And there was of fish. I guess that Salween might have more levels than the Mekong River. They have potential over 1,000 species occur there, and maybe over 100 species are unknown or new to science. whereas the Mekong now, they left only 30 species due to SARS, but most of the 900 species are known already.
Again, good comment. Thank you. So just, can others just be thinking about, there was a question there about, integrating. You made the suggestion, integrate. How do you integrate the academic work with the civil society-led work and anything else? Company-led work. So just think about your suggestions on how that might be better done in some way. Carl, a quick one, and then Vanessa, and then we'll keep moving.
I think it's important. We shouldn't be homogenizing all knowledge as being the same. But I think more for me, I take this as a question of recognizing that all knowledge is valuable in different ways. And some knowledge can also, it's totally legitimate to produce different knowledge for different purposes. For example, I think that academic knowledge isn't always actionable, meaning that it's difficult to translate some academic knowledge directly into policy implications, because it's not necessarily designed to do that. It's designed to explain things rather than make it directly used for a policy recommendation. So I think I agree then with the value of integrating knowledge as well, to recognize that different types of knowledge can contribute different aspects to make a kind of combined or integrated knowledge actionable. And I think, to me, this is what this presentation is talking to. Thank you.
Vanessa, please.
Yeah, thanks for all the comments. I think that, I agree with Carl in the sense that I think considering and recognizing different contributions isn't the same as saying they're the same. I think that different kinds of research play different roles. I think who does the research really does matter, not just to the outputs, but to who trusts or wants to participate or would be interested in understanding more about that. So you can see how you actually need a range of collaborators working on these issues in order to reach a broader audience that stems from maybe the community work to national, subnational level governance, even to transboundary work. And a lot of us, I think, in this room have been working on or across those different scales. And I think you're going to hear a bit more from these two presenters about some of those tensions in their work. So thanks.
Thanks, Vanessa. So we'll keep moving, but basically when we get to the end of the session, just suggestions. Everyone here is pretty committed. So you're going to be working in this space for quite some time. So how to be more effective? How can you help someone else? How can they help you? So thank you, Vanessa, for that first address. Can I now invite Madame Cherry Ong to speak to us? And the topic that we have listed in the program is fisheries and socio-economic change in the Tullamarine River estuary in Mon and Cayenne State. So please, the floor is yours.
Good afternoon, everyone. Today I am going to present my book chapter heading the fishery and socio-economic changes in the Tullamarine River estuary in Mon and Cayenne State, Myanmar.